I think I let everybody in. Yep. So Brad, I'm going to make you the co-host. Yeah. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Hello, everyone. Can nobody, you can hear me? Yes. Okay. Good.
Hello.
All right. Hi. Let's give people, it's just 6 o'clock. Let's give people a minute to join in. And then Brad, you'll help me keep track of admitting people as they come. So I don't really, it's 6:01. I'm going to go ahead and start so that we have time to get to people's questions and comments. So let's see. So we're here to talk about the building program, which we put a draft out last Friday. We've updated that draft a couple of times now, and those drafts are all on the website. And I am going to give everybody a tour of the website. So I'm going to share. This is the library's website. You can get there through going to mnspear.org. And then the part I want to show you is a small library pilot project page. So if you scroll down, there's a link to it right on the home page. And then there's a link over here in the sidebar. So you click that link and it brings you to the small library pilot project webpage. And it has videos and recordings of the tours and the meetings that we've had. All except for one of the meetings has a recording. And then after this meeting, I'll post the recording of this meeting up here too. And then it's got, this is a question and answer document that we made and put up just a couple of days ago. And then these are the library building programs. This is the list of wishes from the wish tree. This is a document that talks about the cost breakdown between the town that gets the grant and the state. And then these are older posts. So you know, so you can keep scrolling down. And as we put more information up there, we're finding it's easier to put it just as links to other documents instead of having all of the information on the page. So there's lots of information on this page. This question and answers section is 5 or 6 pages of information in itself. So now I want to talk about just how we made the building program. So much of it is just questions that the Board of Library Commissioners asked about, you know, library data. So they want us to describe the community and describe the library and describe how people use the library. And then from that use data, that you know, the circulation data and the programming data, that data informs what kind of a library we need for Shutesbury. So how are we using the library now? And when we plan the program areas, and the program areas are really what you know, are the information that the architects will take and then incorporate into a design. We think about when we think of each of the areas, we think about what's going to be in that area. So how many books, what kind of furniture, what kind of equipment, how is it going to be used? In previous grant rounds, the building program would guide the architect as they design the building. And then the architect and the community would have conversations and goals would be adjusted as they came up with a plan. And then that plan would be used to in a grant application. And the goal is so our goal in creating a building program is to describe a library that meets the needs of the town of Shutesbury based on usage data, needs expressed by the community, library trends, and feedback from library directors and other small town libraries. And it's no easy task. So with all of that said, and then the difference with this plan is we so half the time in previous grant rounds, half the time those schematic designs and the plans created, from the building program didn't end up get used. So they found that it wasn't an efficient system. So now we're charged with creating a building program and being so clear in it, and so that we sort of create a building program so that it really, so that the architects can meet. So now we have the Board of Library Commissioners has enough experience from this 30 years of running this program. So they know the elements in a building program that make a building program work. And they want to design a building program so that there aren't surprises on the other end. So if we get the building program right now, when we bring it to the architects won't turn around and say, we can't design a building in this square footage that will do what you're asking us to do. So, and because I've been through this process before, I've seen the whole thing go through, and I've seen with our last grant round, our building program was 5,500 square feet, but the design ended up being 5,800 square feet. And that's not really a significant difference. But our goal is to prevent something like that from happening. Our goal is to design a building program that we get it right so that the architects can design a building that meets the needs of the program within the square feet that we assign it. So with that, I'm going to take your questions. I'm going to make this gallery view. And maybe, oh, I know, I have to stop sharing my screen. I don't know where, oh, here it is. Sorry, this has gotten really weird. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay. So maybe since there are quite a few people, Jill, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
I do. I was wondering if well, a couple of things. What is the MBLC funding limit as it was going to be reconsidered upwards?
They haven't given a new limit.
So as it stands, it's 3 million or?
No, so they said that they can be flexible with that. So they're willing to pay more than $3 million, but not more than 75% of the eligible cost.
Is the parking lot and the parking lot to the new library and the driveway and all the site work, is that eligible or ineligible?
So I'm gonna write that question down. And I'm gonna get back to you. So let's see. So is the parking lot, the road, and the site work eligible or ineligible? So I think that's a complicated answer. So I'm going to write it down and I'm going to get a complicated, get the full answer and then get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Can I just ask you one more question at this point? Have you received the results of the testing of the 2 potential sites?
We have reports. I haven't read them. And we are going to, I'm working on scheduling the site professionals to come to a trustee meeting the week after next. And then the week after that, they'll do a public meeting with the reports, with those results. Okay, so watch for a meeting the week after Halloween or the week after that, a public meeting. Mike has his hand up. Mike Binsky.
Yeah, thank you. So I was wondering what the what the process is for basically taking things out of the plan right now. I mean, I've watched as the plan has come together with inputs from a lot of different sources. And it was basically if somebody said, I think this should be added, it was added. But I think this draft plan right now is for a building that's way too large for what the town needs and what it can afford. And if I were to say, well, I think it should be significantly smaller, how is that going to be addressed? What's the process for getting that addressed?
I think you should say your specific recommendations, and then we're hearing recommendations and requests from lots of people, and the trustees will discuss it in their meeting on Sunday. And we'll consider it in combination with all of the feedback that we're getting.
So, well, it's, so you're basically, you're asking to put together a completely different plan than what you've spent months putting together. And then the trustees are going to look at that Sunday night before they send this out Monday. That doesn't really leave a lot of
people talking very
time
personal, sharing
to
personal
really
details.
analyze
So I
that
think if
and
just a
to
couple of people
get
talking.
reasonable feedback from other
I
people.
also went by and
Well, we've been getting feedback for a couple of months now, Mike. And if you have specific feedback, then please, give us specific feedback, and then we can know and we can compare it to the rest of the data. And, and make adjustments or not compared to the data.
Well, this as an idea, the Leverett and Wendell libraries appear to be a more sized more appropriately for something that that Shutesbury could have, and they have already been they've gone through the whole design process, the build process, and everything. Why wouldn't it make sense to just take their blueprints or their plan or whatever and copy that and build the exact same thing in Shutesbury? That would be one of my suggestions. And so is that going to go to the library trustees now?
Yeah, let me write it down and then I'll read it back to you, okay? So, copy it and All right. So Leverett and Wendell are sized more appropriately. Why not take their plans and blueprints, copy it and apply it to Shutesbury's library? Does that sound about right?
Sounds pretty good. All right,
Um,
thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Let me go back to the screen. So Carolyn, I saw your hand next.
Yes. Actually, I have a more general question about
Okay.
how you figure out the library program based on current offerings in the small space and how you can project how much is really needed. And I just want to say, if this is the wrong time to answer this question, you're welcome to answer it at any point.
Okay, thanks. So how do I? So
How do you project what you will need as a library program when a
Right.
lot of it is based on the current small library,
Right.
which is inadequate for programming?
Right. So a lot of the programming that I do, and we'll just think of the programming that we did before COVID. So a lot of that programming was done in places other than our current library. So I just want to say that before I was library director, there really wasn't a culture of library programming in Shutesbury.
Right.
There had been, it would sort of wax and wane. There would be, when Linda Priblo was library director, she had concerts on the Common in the summertime. And then there was a summer reading program a lot of the time. But it was, your kid reads books, you write them down, and there's a party outdoors at the end. It wasn't regular, family programming.
That's pretty
Um,
standard.
Yeah. And there was a story time here in the library tucked in a corner when my kids were little, so 20 years ago. And then when I started as library director, they had just decided that having a story time in a library that didn't have a bathroom and didn't have appropriate parking and was just too difficult. So they had stopped doing it. But I started doing story time again because I think kids need story time. So what I've done from the very beginning is try to run the library like we were already in that bigger library. So while none of it was perfect, and it's been a tremendous amount of work for me, loading up my car and driving it, keeping stuff stored at my house, and then driving it up to town hall and then putting it back in my car. There's always library stuff in my car. And then going back and forth across the street, using the Shutesbury Athletic Club, doing things outside and hoping it wouldn't rain. So what I've done is I've tried to use other places. There have always been people who weren't able to come to the program, so they couldn't come to the programs in the basement of town hall because it's such a moldy, musty space. They couldn't come to the programs at the athletic club because there's alcohol and cigarette smoke there, or they didn't feel comfortable bringing their children there. And then the library, we've had some very small programs in the library, story time. One small book club meets in the library. We had a very small knitting group. The problem with programs in the library was they always had to be done outside of library hours. So we had a group of knitters, and I would have to make time in my day and in the schedule of the library to let the knitters come in. And it was a small group. It would be 2 to 5 people who met twice a month. And they would just love to get together, this little group of knitters. And so twice a month, I would have to make sure I was here outside of those regular library hours to make room for the knitters. And then the library was opening and the knitters would have to pack up their stuff and go. So that's how I plan it all now, is borrow other people's spaces or offer programs in the library when the library is not open. But it means a lot more work for the library director and working more hours for the library director. And it also limits the number of programs you can have, because those sort of passive do-it-yourself programs like the knitting, where it's just a group of people knitting, you know, that was dependent on me making the time and the space available, where if we just had a library building that was open, the knitters could just be on the schedule and they could get the chairs out themselves, and we wouldn't have to, you know, plan a time outside of library hours for something like that. Same thing for story time, same thing for the science fiction book club. All of those things that couldn't happen while the library was open. And then if I was having a program over at town hall, you know, I would plan those outside of the library hours too, because I couldn't be there to open up and to lock up and be here at the same time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Alrighty. Leslie, you were on my list next.
Okay,
And then Michael.
you can hear me, okay?
Yep.
Okay, so as you know, I wrote a 2-page letter to you and the Board of Trustees yesterday. And I will simply start with my leading question, although let me just say I have several other specific questions that I want to follow up with. And the first question is, what is the estimated square footage of the proposed library?
That's a good question. And I'm going to say we don't know. So we are still in draft form. And I'm still figuring out spaces. I sent a draft to Lauren and Andrea at the Board of Library Commissioners, and they sent back some questions. And I'm reworking some of the areas. So, so I had, in the draft plan, I had 800 square feet for adult collections, and I was doing that. So you have to plan certain size aisles for ADA compliance. And I was hoping to shave off some square footage by putting some aisles against the wall and not have to have some of that area for ADA compliance. And what I didn't know is that if you have a dead end aisle, the aisle has to be 5 feet wide, because it has to be wide enough for a wheelchair to turn around. So, I wasn't going to save space that way. So, so there are a few areas where I have to go back to the drawing board, and well, not completely to the drawing board, but so here's how it works. There's assignable space. So things like the adult collections and the children's room and the community meeting room and the teen room, all of those spaces have numbers attached to them. And then there are things that are unassignable space. So things like corridors and mechanical rooms and telecom closets. Those are spaces that fall into this category called unassignable spaces. They're not really things that can be assigned until systems are designed and you know what they're going to take. So what you do is you describe all of those program areas like we've done, and then you add that up and you get a total. And then you multiply that by 30%, and that 30% covers the unassignable space. So all of those other things. And that number is still in flux. So, and will be for a few days.
Oh, okay. So this building program is going to be submitted on Monday. Do you have any kind of an idea as to the square footage plus the 30% that you're working with? I mean, this is very frustrating to somebody who wants to understand this process and what your goal is for submitting on Monday.
Right. So I don't have a goal for the square footage. But I'll say it is 5,000 to 6,000 square feet.
So that goal of 5,000 to 6,000 square feet is what I totaled up in terms of the program area descriptions that have been posted on the library is, and again, this is rough. I'm not saying that I'm a wonderful Einstein here, but what I figured out is that there is a total of 5,260 square feet plus undetermined area descriptions. And that's another, so we have a minimum of 50, somewhere around a minimum of 5,600 using previous figures. And then we're talking about another 30% of that.
Right, so some of
But
your,
wait, Marianne, that takes us way over 6,000,
okay,
way over 6,000.
okay, so I'm not gonna argue with you. Some of your figures, so those things that you said were undetermined fall into that unassignable space, some of those things. And then I'm taking out the pavilion and the outdoor storage, because those are a different category. When I'm adding up my numbers, but the things like the telecom closet, the bathrooms I did add back in, those are 120 square feet combined. But the telecom closet and the mechanical room, and there was one other space, those are unassigned spaces that fall under that 30%. So that's why they don't have spaces assigned.
Okay, I understand that, but are you saying that the 700 square feet for the pavilion, the 200 square feet for the storage space are not considered as part of the total square footage in the building program?
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have it in the plan, but have it as an optional. So have the plan be designed to accommodate those things, but have them be an optional thing, and then have a community conversation about funding it. So those things could be funded. 75% of the construction of those things could be covered by the Board of Library Commissioners. Or we could wait and not include those things and then fund them using other grants and fundraising after the fact.
Well, I'm going to defer to other people who have their hands raised because I have some additional questions that I want to ask you. So I want to thank you for being forthcoming in answering the questions that I've answered so far. So Michael, take it away.
Thanks, Leslie. So Marianne, I want to start by appreciating you. This program is a lot of work, and it's not your expertise. You can get hired to be a program developer for buildings, so thank you. And generally, I would say I'm not surprisingly highly supportive of the way this looks. I guess I was inspired by Mike Vinsky's question, in the sense that, I know that you're aware of, that Wendell and Leverett and Irving and local other new libraries. And I guess if you could speak to what lessons they learned after they built, because they were built under the regular library program and have been in operation for a few years. So is there stuff that they've communicated to you that, they said, we'd love if we had done something differently that you're incorporating to this based on that input?
That's a good question, Michael. Thank you. So the Leverett and Wendell, Irving's brand new, and Irving has issues. But that's a whole different, have you been over there yet? It's really,
I haven't been to Irving, no.
it's 8,300 square feet. They have all the bells and whistles. But still, I think if they could do it again, there are things that they would do differently. But Leverett and Wendell are libraries where I've spent a lot of time, and have, close relationships with the library directors. And one thing both previous library directors and current library directors of both of those libraries say is they wish they had a small study room. And this is something that we get, that a lot of people have asked for, on the wish tree and in community meetings. They talk about a small collaboration space or a study room. So somebody studying for an exam has a small room that they can go off and study in. This happened right after the Wendell Library opened. There was a young mom who was studying for her nursing exams, and she had got an RN, and she didn't have a quiet studies place to study at home, and she came to the brand new library hoping for a small study room, and they didn't have one. And the other problem, and both Wendell and Leverett have that same issue. The other issue that comes up in Wendell is the circulation area is too small. So you walk in the door and you're right there at the desk, and then there's no room behind the desk for a book truck. And you need a couple of book trucks behind a circulation desk. And I think, and partly I think about it, and I think about like what I've been working in for 14 years now. And like we trip over the book trucks. But Wendell says their circulation area is too small, and they wish they had a small meeting room. The other thing about the Wendell Library, so Wendell is less than 900 people. And so Shutesbury is about twice the size of Wendell. So it's not really comparing apples to apples. But they wish they had a small study room, and they wish they had more circulation room. And they wish their children's room was bigger. They've worked for years to sort of configure their children's room so that it works, and they're still working on it. Leverett, so we just visited Leverett. Leverett has a brand new director. Leverett wishes they had a small study room. They wish their teen room was bigger. And they wish their community meeting room was a little bit bigger. And that's another thing that we hear a lot is we wish the community meeting room was bigger. And so we heard that a lot the last time when we were writing the building program back in 2008, 2009. People said, we wish the community meeting room was bigger. And we made this 1,000 square foot community meeting room. In this plan, the community meeting room is 700 square feet, because that'll be big enough most of the time. There'll be times when we wish it was bigger, but most of the time that'll be a big enough room. And that's what I've kind of gone for in this plan is let's make a plan that works most of the time instead of making the ideal library. And we've added in that small study room. We didn't have that in the last plan. And we've made the teen area a little bigger, and we made the director's office a little bit bigger. The director's office in the last plan was 60 square feet. That's kind of ridiculous. So those are lessons I've learned from talking to other library directors, and in Western Massachusetts, Southern Vermont, and then even rural Idaho. So. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess my takeaway is it seems like your approach makes sense in that across the board, the comments are, we wish we had a little bit more size and space for the functions that we needed. So your approach of it works most of the time, but not all the time seems prudent. So thank you for that.
So I think Susie was next, and then Tim Logan. Jill, you have your hand up. Is it from before or okay?
No, again.
Okay. All righty. You can go after Tim. Okay.
Thank you.
I see that this is called a building program plan, and I think the emphasis is on the programs. And when I read the draft, I'm very excited that we are looking at a draft of library programs. And like Carolyn asked, how would you know if you haven't had them? Well, we do know. And we also know that in 2009, a similar plan was accepted by the MBLC, and they made the award of the grant, because this is what a library program looks like. The amount of actual square foot space and how the spaces are linked and designed is a task that will be joined by not only the things that Marianne and the Board of Library Trustees have put in the plan, the program, but also with an architect who may be able to design these spaces to be well linked and have adjacencies that save space or use space more in a better design. So I don't feel that this is the point where we know what the building square footage looks like, but we do know what programs the Board of Library Trustees and the input that Marianne has had from people, what programs want to happen in Shutesbury. And the other thing that's different from what happened in Leverett and Wendell, and when we went to Leverett, we saw this, that the outside space, which COVID really has made important, has to be developed in Leverett as an afterthought. There were certain things that came out very nicely in their patio, but there were things that it was missing. So this design for 2021 includes programming that we know we want to be able to do if we have situations where COVID and other emergencies are going to be attended to. So I appreciate the dynamic program that is in this design. And as the square footage gets worked out, then we will know that information more clearly a little later.
Tim, did you have a question? I wrote you on my list. No? Okay. All right. Jill, I think you're next.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the outdoor pavilion, and I'm momentarily relieved that momentarily it appears to be an option. Because one word I would describe about the size of that outdoor pavilion is indulgent. 700 square foot outdoor pavilion, indulgent. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I silenced everybody. Everybody is like, because you did say it, you did say it was going to be that it could be optional, correct?
Yep.
Is that feedback from the MBLC, or why you're reconsidering?
No, the MBLC is completely willing to pay 75% of the cost of a pavilion.
Yeah, it's what we're paying. That's what my concern is. I'm not worried about the MBLC, yeah. But what we're ending up going to pay, and I think 700 square feet is indulgent and unaffordable. Thank you.
So Mike Vinsky is next.
Yeah, thanks. So as I was looking over the draft, trying to get a visual picture of what this floor plan might look like, and why it may be turning out to be as large as I think it's going to be. It seems like a lot of the areas and spaces are segregating groups and people. Like there's the adult reading nook, there's a teen room, there's a children's room, there's a adult computer area. And each one of those has to have its own particular square footage. I'm wondering why in a community that prides itself on getting along with each other and community activities and being together, why you can't, why you have to have all these things separated, why you couldn't have like one area that has a large table for people that have work to do, a couple easy chairs for people that want to read a book, and additional table with a computer or two on it. It seems you could save a lot of space that way by having more of a general area than segregating all the different groups away in different corners of the library.
I'm writing that down. Anybody else? Molly, you have a question? Are you still here, Molly? Maybe she got interrupted. Oh,
Can you
there
hear
you
me
are.
now?
Okay, yep.
I have this awful button on my headphones that mutes myself without me realizing it. Sorry. I'll start over. My understanding as to why all these spaces were segregated in the building plan is that that was the template we received from the MBLC, and they want the information about all the spaces to be delineated like that for both the MBLC people and the potential architects or planners or whatever in the future so that they can see it, and that some of those areas do overlap or at least kind of are near each other. That's why we have all the like, this is near to and far away from, and that there will definitely be communal areas, but that, the board books need to have their own space. That is not where the large print books are.
Thanks, Molly. Let me look. Okay, Les, you have your hand up again.
Yes, I do. Perhaps not for the last time. I'm going to go back to the draft building program once again, and I'm going to read from the Q&A that says the draft building program will contribute an estimate of the square footage of the proposed library, which is obviously an important determinant factor in the total cost. So again, based on my numbers of just tallying up the square footages that are in the draft that's posted on the website, is that we are looking at 5,200 square feet. That was my tally. I've done it a few times. And again, if you add 30%, we're looking at 6,800 feet and change. And so far, you've talked about eliminating, or is optional, the 700 square feet for the pavilion and the 200 square feet for the storage, which kind of might get us between that figure of 5,000 and 6,000 you had mentioned, but it's pretty much in the high end of the 5,000 range, between 5,000 and 6,000. So that kind of leads me to, again, the letter that I wrote to you and the library board commissioners in terms of where are the possibilities of cutting down on that square footage. Because as I just mentioned, that is obviously an important determinant figure in the final cost. So in my letter, I had questioned, as you know, the 700 square feet for the outdoor pavilion, the 200 square feet for that. And my reasons for that is when I was at the Wendell Library just a few days ago, you know, their outdoor space is really nice. They have created an outdoor programming space. But again, as far as I know from talking with the library director, this was done through community efforts, and this was done through the community itself, not through programming or a grant from the state. So I think, once again, that those are, in terms of optional spaces, to me, those are very, very optional. So the other questions that I raised in my letter, can the size of the adult section be reduced, which those three areas are right now 1,000 square feet? Can the children's room or parenting room, 800 square feet, be reduced? Are both a study collaboration room, 150 square feet, a young team adult room, square feet, are both really needed? And again, I'll let you respond to this, but again, I'm just giving you another warning. I'll probably have some more questions. Thank you.
So we have your suggestions noted, Les. And so I guess I would have a question for you. What data do you have that would support reducing the adult collections, the adult area, or the children's area, or the small study room, or the team room? What data do you have that would support not providing those features in the library?
That's a great question. I don't have any data, but what I'm going on is trying to reduce the overall square footage to something that is affordable in terms of the taxpayers, in terms of all taxpayers, not only people who are supporting the library, no matter how much it costs, but people who are not necessarily, who can use and want to use the library, but at a reduced scale.
All right, well, I've noted that, and
Thank you.
and we have your letter. Okay, so let me just look. Michael Day-Chiara, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. I guess this session is for you to get input as opposed to debate things. So I would just say I'm in strong support of getting the size, because that seems to be a big issue that you need. And my understanding is that the state's paying for $75% of every square foot that we build. You know, except for the ones that are ineligible, which, you know, you've got a listing of. So my input is 75% off is a pretty good deal to get something that's going to work for the town, you know, now and in the future. So I just strongly would say, plan for what we need, because we're already making out better than we would have 10 years ago when we were only getting 50%. So we're already doing better. So that's my input.
Mike Minsky, your hand up is new, I think.
Yeah, thanks again. Yeah, just to catch a little bit of what Michael said. So, you know, we're looking at building a library that's going to satisfy the needs of the town. And I'm not so sure that the needs that have been identified are truly needs, or if they're just like things that people really, really would like to have. And I think, you know, I'm a little confused as to what, you know, what is, you know, how something gets to be a need and becomes something mandatory that the library has to deal with. And I think that goes along with the programming. You know, Susie talked a lot about the programming that the library does. And again, it's, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's, you know, programs at the library are there as an activity for someone to participate in, but it's not something that if they didn't, it's going to be, it's going to significantly change their life or have a negative impact on their being or anything. So I'm a little concerned that there's a lot of talk about making sure that we can provide this wide range of programming, when in reality it's not a particular need. And while I've got the floor, then I'd also like to mention, again, going back to the process a little bit, that you know, at this point where there's a draft going into the MBLC, with basically no idea of the size of the square footage of the library, is a little disconcerting. And this goes hand in hand with the inability of the trustees and I don't know, maybe you, Mary Ann, to get some sort of a grip on what this building might cost. And you know, if it weren't for a bunch of comments being made on Nextdoor Shutesbury over the last couple of weeks, this, you know, tonight's meeting and tomorrow's meeting probably wouldn't have happened. There was a lot of feedback that the draft was being put out and the public hadn't seen it, and it was going to go to the MBLC without any public input. So, and now it's, you know, it's stimulated a good conversation about what the size of this library is going to look like. And at the same time, though, I think now is the time that we need to start getting some estimates, getting a grip on what the cost is going to be. Because the idea right now is that this information isn't going to be available until sometime just before annual town meeting. And at that point, it's going to be locked in. The cost is going to be the cost, and it's either going to be a yes or no. There's not going to be any room for redefining the plan or the design or anything. So, so those are additional couple concerns I have. Whether we're playing this for the actual needs of the town, or if these are just a lot of really nice to have things, and that we need to get the size of this building and the cost. We've got to get some numbers on that before this goes much further. Thanks.
I'm just going to say that there's no way to get any cost estimate before the grant application goes in. And we've been very clear about that from the very beginning. Molly, you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I know a lot of directors or library people who have been in new building projects where the building was basically built for only their current needs. And as soon as they moved in, it was full. They didn't have any room to grow. And that the rule of thumb is really to be building a building that will that you can use for the next 20 years. And in our case, I think we'll be able to use it obviously for much longer than that. But my fear is that we would cut so much that we would move into a building that we would all be immediately bursting at the seams at. I don't think I think the 5,000 to 6,000 range will work really well. Another thing I want to say is that my understanding, I mean, we don't have the grant yet. That's like the first thing we need to do. And then it'll be like an iterative, like we're telling them like, these are the things that we want. And then like they'll design it and we'll have input, and it'll be this iterative process. This is not like the end of this process. And I also wanted to say something about programming. I mean, I met my community in Shutesbury when I moved with young children through the library. And there's been talk about like an epidemic of loneliness that was just worsened through the COVID crisis, and that having a place where people can go together is, I think, actually like a health issue. I just wanted to say that.
And I want to just say about library program and library services and just the fact that public libraries exist. So there are people who don't use libraries and maybe don't need libraries. But for the people who do need the library, it really does make a difference in their life. So Mike said that not having access to library programs won't have a negative impact on their being. And I have had so many people express appreciation for the programs that I offer, that I work very hard to offer, and express that it really makes a difference for their being. So if the programming didn't make a difference, I wouldn't be able to get $18,000 in grant money a year to make it happen. So, so I know the value of the services I provide for this community, and I'm really glad that I do, because it makes it happen, and I don't need it to be validated in order to continue making it happen. Susie, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. When Wendell and Leverett opened their new library, they commented, the directors commented on people who had been opposed, who showed up in the new library space and realized how important and how valuable a thriving, healthy.
Oh, you froze up, Susie. Well, maybe she'll come back.
Library with space for the community members. Is it there?
We're here. I think you're freezing up.
All right.
Okay. Now I can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes. So you started saying that
Yeah.
when Wendell and Leverett opened, that the library directors commented that people came in and were surprised by how people
positive-
responded to the library.
The positive effect on the community. Shutesbury needs a place for community to connect to each other. That is a need. We don't have that. We don't have a staffed, safe place where people can congregate and see each other and be with each other. And like Molly said, under COVID, the loneliness has become a national problem. The value of libraries is strong in New England since the beginning. And so if you look at other areas across the country, New England is stellar with its support for libraries. I appreciate the designs that the Board of Library Trustees and Marianne have done to increase the access, both physically and the different groups that need libraries, because those are building community values. I feel like there's people in this community that haven't found a way to positively contribute and connect. And I think the library is exactly that function.
Les, I see you have your hand up again.
Yes, thank you. Regarding the question about a community center or a place where people can come to, again, my personal impression being at the Leverett and the Wendell libraries, very comfortable, very welcoming spaces where people can come and congregate. And both of those square footages were less than 5,000. It doesn't mean that you can't create a place where people can come, be welcome, see each other. As a matter of fact, from the time that Jill and I moved into the community 30 years ago, we enjoyed coming to the library at its less than 1,000 square feet to meet people, to chat with Marianne. And it was a sense where this was a place where people could gather and congregate. You don't need to have anything more than 5,000 square feet, in my opinion. So, and I agree, it's important to have a place, but again, to what extent are we creating, quote, a community center vis-a-vis a library where people can come, congregate, participate in programs, yes, and at the same time, read books, have quiet space. I think all of that can be done. I had just, again, for the record, some additional questions that I put in my 2-page letter. And with your indulgence, I'm going to just read those out. On page 26 of the draft, there's a statement that proposed library should include a lockdown area or safe room. And my question is, where, how, and why would this be included?
So the staff workroom could be the safe room, or the director's office. I think the way that those 2 rooms are proposed, they could have locking doors. And those would be included because in public buildings that anybody from the public who can come in, or in the case of a lockdown somewhere else in town, there needs to be a safe place for the people in the building to go, a safe place with a door that can lock. You know, this is just a reality of the society we live in now. There was a case in a library, let's see, so in New Mexico, there was a shooting in a library not long ago. And then in another library, there was a stabbing. So if we're going to build a new library, why wouldn't we have a room with a locking door that, you know, that whoever was in the library could go into, and you could lock the door if there were something going on. It would be irresponsible not to include that now, knowing the world we live in.
So the library, the director's room or the staff room could be closed, and that would be what your sense is for a safe room or a lockdown room.
Right. A room with a locking door.
Okay. So I'm not going to what you had said the other night about how safe Shutesbury is compared to Leverett and Leverett's decision about having 2 people on, but let's just leave that aside. Page 36 of the draft. We hope the library building program can include the library serving as a heating and cooling center and a source of constant power and running water. And so my question, as I wrote it, is where, how, and why would this be provided? Is this intended to be a mini emergency shelter for town residents? And if so, shouldn't the select board and other town committees decide and fund an emergency shelter that will serve an adequate number of town residents? I mean, there's a lot that I packed into that, but I think it's important.
Yep. Well, I think we've already told you we're not planning an emergency shelter. So the library will be a public building that is staffed and is open. You know, I mean, we were open 29.5 hours a week before the pandemic. You know, so the library will be open, it'll be staffed, it'll have power. We already function as a heating center and a cooling center. Not so much now because we have limited capacity and it's really not safe to come into this building. But before the pandemic, I used to extend the hours on very hot days. And people would come in. There was one time when somebody was lying on the floor on a very hot day and cooling off because the library is the only public air-conditioned building in town. And people come now if the power is out, and so again, people aren't coming in and plugging in inside, but they used to come in and plug in inside. But people plug in outside, or they use the internet when their internet is out or when their power is out at home. This is just a function of public libraries. So if we're going to build a new library, first of all, it has to have a backup power source because it'll have water in it. And if it doesn't have a backup power source and the power goes out, and the power will go out in Shutesbury, the pipes will freeze and there'll be flooding, and our new library will then be damaged. So, so we wouldn't build a new public building without a backup power source nowadays. And then we'll have a public library that has power when the power is out, and people can come and they can get warm, you know, take the edge off. They won't be able to stay overnight. And they can come in the summertime when it's hot and they can cool off. And if their power is out at home, they can plug in their phone and charge it. And if their internet is out at home, they can come in and they can do whatever they need to do on the internet. It's just a function of public libraries. It's something that already happens. It already happens here. We'll just be able to do it better. And it's not the library's job to decide what the town should provide. But if the town were to provide an emergency shelter, what money would be used to build it? Who would staff it? How much would that cost the town? And what purpose would that serve of just having an emergency shelter that is only available during emergencies? This is a small town. Our small town with a small volunteer government and a very small skeleton staff isn't capable of meeting every need of every resident all the time. But we can have an adequate public library that can make people's lives a lot better.
I'll just one final comment, Mary Ann, if I may, is if we are talking about, and I hear what you're saying, it's not the responsibility of the library to provide an emergency shelter, but I had mentioned this in a previous letter that I had sent, is it really is attended with climate change and continued power outages, climate disasters, however you want to phrase it, that the town really does need to take the responsibility to provide for an emergency shelter that can provide 24-hour backup and shelter for people when these emergencies happen. And I know one of your co-chairs in the Library Board of Trustees is very sympathetic to the need for those kinds of emergency shelters. So I just want to go on record. I hear what you're saying, and at the same time, I can't not resist saying that the town really needs to step up and take on the responsibilities that a town should take on and take some of the burden or responsibility off the shoulders of the library to meet these really full community needs. Thank you.
I see Mike Finsky has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. You know, as I'm listening to this program going forward here, I'm getting concerned that people are raising issues that are being explained away by the library director. I was under the impression that these were going to be going to the Board of Trustees, and it seems to me that they're just they're not getting there. We're getting a comment, answer, or whatever from you, Mary Ann, and I personally don't feel that's adequate response to these concerns that are being brought up. So I really hope that you're taking good notes and that these issues are going to be passed along to the trustees. I also am a little concerned about one of the things Leslie said, and that's about the library opening or operating during an emergency situation. I understand that the reasoning for having a backup system to make sure the pipes don't freeze and everything, but I'm a little concerned that in an emergency, the library would expect to be open, and that doesn't make sense to me. It's the same thing in the pandemic, that there's a great effort to make sure the library was open, even though it wasn't, maybe it wasn't the safest thing to do to be able to have people in close proximity during a pandemic. I would I would imagine that in an emergency situation like that, the library would be closed, and the emergency would be handled by the emergency management director and the rest of the town staff, and that the library would not be part of that, which keeps all the library staff safe and eliminates a lot of confusion as to what buildings are open and what buildings are closed. So I hope those get passed on also.
Mike, there are two, I think, did you leave, Mike? Nope, you're still here. There are two library trustees in this meeting, and the meeting's being recorded. Let's see, Brad, do you have something you wanted to say?
Well, as a trustee, I just wanted to respond that I really like what Marianne's responses have been. These are all things we've talked about in our meeting. These are things we continue to talk about in our meeting. And one of my points in being here not only is to listen and absorb the comments, but I'm taking notes, and Marianne's taking notes, because we take the whole public comment process very seriously, and we discuss all this. There's many different opinions on things, and our job is to consolidate them into what we think the best program will be. But anyway, I just, in response to Mike, I just wanted to make it clear that we have talked about this, and we will again.
On Sunday, right?
On Sunday, and again after that. And this is not a process that stops. We have many stages along the path, and we have a lot of work to do.
And having sat in on many of the previous library trustees meeting, I really appreciate the thought, effort, time, energy that you have all put into this.
We have time for one more question. And we don't have to have more questions. Let's see. So I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat.
Marianne, I just have my hand up.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I want to make sure of what I'm hopefully not hearing by some people, that people who are questioning the size and the fit for our community of a new library. I hope I'm not hearing that you people are not going to be welcome in the library, or because you have raised these questions on behalf of ourselves and the community, that hope I'm not hearing that we should be like walk into a new library with our heads down, as if we were unwelcome, or that we were on the wrong side of democracy or something. I hope I'm not hearing that. Has anybody been hearing that tonight?
Brad, did you want to respond to that?
Sure. No, we don't feel that at all. We are, one of our fundamental goals is the library is for the whole town, for everybody. I mean, I'm talking before the whole building program came up. This is just part of the trustees and Marianne's vision for the library. One of the things we talk about in trustee meetings is, well, how can we reach different audiences? And how can we be welcoming to everybody? And those attitudes and goals will continue right through it. We want to build a new library because we think it's vital and very important to town and be a very great benefit to town. But we also so much it's for the entire town. There's not going to be any sense on our side of the kind of things you're talking about. So that's my reaction.
Mhm.
So in June and July, we had 3 community forums gathering feedback for the library's long-range plan. And we talked a lot in one of the sessions about how, you know, like there's a lot of stuff that happens and a lot of people participate in it, and but some people don't. And so then how do you get the word across that the library is for you, you know, and you and you and you and you. It's not for me, right? I'm just a person who works here. This library is for everybody. It's so that you can get the materials that you need and come to programs that you're interested in. It's so that if your power is out, you can come to the library and you can get the phone number of the electric company and charge your cell phone and call them. Of course, nowadays you go online and you look at the outage map. It's for, you know, people, whether or not they are regular library users or people who never imagined using a library. All the programs we've had over these years have been, they've served dual purpose, you know, like giving people a program that's something that they're interested in. Promoting literacy for children is a big goal, but it's also to foster community connections, and the library fostering community connections is good for each individual. It's good for the library. It's good for the town. The library is for everyone.
I don't think you're addressing my concern. I heard earlier that people who oppose the library in other towns, there was some kind of feeling I got, and I'm just saying that just because people are questioning the affordability and the size of a library, of which I don't think really the library trustees are taking seriously, because I don't think you've changed anything. When you keep on hearing from people, we want something affordable. We're watching our property taxes. The people who rent here, if property taxes go up, their rent is going to go up. I don't think you are really hearing us or taking seriously the financial impact on people. And I will not have a community, regardless of the library, the new library's ability to connect people, if I can't afford to live here anymore, which we're teetering on the edge. That's what I don't think you people understand, that people are teetering on the edge. So when you talk about community, we are part of the community. You want to throw us out? You're not taking it seriously. MBLC is offering us all this. Sounds like it's going to be all accepted. I'm sure it's already a done deal. And then they walk away and we have to deal with it. It may be a wonderful thing that they're offering us all this money, but we pay a high price for it. Well, just asking you to consider and reconsider the size of some of these spaces, the outdoor pavilion, even the children's and the parents' gathering space, the meeting room, all these gathering spaces. That's nice, but this is a library. And if the town has failed the taxpayers of Shutesbury because they don't have a healthy place to conduct business with, or council on aging, an elder meeting room, a lounge, because it's so unhealthy. And, you know, they've done nothing for the town in that way. And when we were at the Wendell Library, just to say, yes, their meeting room is very, very full most of the time, but you know what they've done? The town used CPA monies and volunteer time to renovate their Memorial Hall. So they have a larger meeting space. And they used funds that the community had. And that's how they solved the problem, with also volunteer labor. I don't think the town has done anything for the people of Shutesbury. And everybody's looking to this library program to meet all our needs and wants. And that's unfortunate.
Well, it's 7:20. I don't see any other hands up. So, unless somebody else does anybody else have anything they want to add? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. I'm just going to use the same list to send out the link for tomorrow's meeting. So you're welcome to come back and listen in again. And thanks so much for your input. Hi, Brad. Oh, you're muted.
When I first entered, I saw the